think it's okay?
Well, good morning. There is a lot of Chiefs red, and I see Vernon Reed coming in right now, and I'm surprised he's not wearing Kentucky blue today. It is so wonderful to see y'all this morning. Welcome to Holmeswood. Welcome to our second session of our Won't You Be My Neighbor series. Just a couple of quick housekeeping things. If you need the restrooms are off in that back direction. When you're walking that way to your right, just follow the hallway, and they're just right there. As well as, remember we started the practice last week, that if you're sitting on this side of the room, if you're on the far end, that there is a little booklet under your chair to fill out your name and your email address. Go ahead and start filling that out, and then passing it that direction, and memorize the name of the person who gave you the book, who handed the book to you. Remember their name, because at the end of the gathering, I'm going to invite you to say hello to that person, greet that person, and use their name. This is Won't You Be My Neighbors, because we are neighborly to one another, and one way to be a good neighbor is to call each other by our name. I am beyond thrilled about today. Whether you are here at 97 at Holmes, or whether you are online via Facebook or YouTube, City Councilwoman Andrea Bough is here with us today. She is phenomenal. When I think of, or try to imagine of what that intersection looks like between a city leader and a life of justice, the face of Councilwoman Andrea Bough quickly comes to mind. She gets it, it's what we might say in Alabama. A couple of quick things. City Councilwoman Andrea Bough is the 6th District at-large council person, so she's our council person for the South Kansas City area. Some of her background includes that she was on Mayor Sly James's transition team. She chaired Mayor James's Commission on Ethics Reform, as well as was part of the Charter Review Commission. Various boards that she's connected with are the Heartland Men's Chorus, the Kansas City chapter of the Missouri Eating Disorder Association, the Jackson County Community Mental Health Fund, and the Jackson County Library. Councilman Bough is an elder and a member at Country Club Christian Church there on Ward Parkway. She is an attorney, with her education being a Bachelor's of Science in Political Science from Missouri State, and her law degree is from UMKC. She is a wife and a mother of Steve and Ashley and Grant, and she's a good friend. So, tenants' right to counsel, housing issue things. When the eviction process begins, Kansas City recently adopted a new ordinance that says if you are starting the eviction process, tenants now have a right to legal representation in that process. This is incredible stuff. So I invite you, whether you are in person, if you are online, please welcome City Councilwoman Andrea Bough.
Well, Pastor, I thank you for that warm welcome.
It is truly an honor to be here today to talk to you about something that I am very passionate about, right to counsel. But I also want to say that it has truly been my honor to meet and become friends with Pastor McDaniel. Over the last year and a half, 2 years, I've gotten to know him. And in ways that he may not even know, he has provided me counsel, encouragement, in a very trying first term on the council and issues that we have faced. And I probably don't have to tell you what a true gem he is, despite the fact that he is an Alabama fan. And my daughter graduated from the University of Georgia this past May. And despite the fact that we have a little rivalry, he is very gracious in his wins and in his recent defeat. Yes, go Dogs. But he has truly been a true friend, and I consider a surrogate pastor to me because he really has provided me with some encouragement during these trying times. I also have to say that one of the unintended positive consequences of COVID is my ability to join you all in worship. And I have joined on Facebook, which has some, downfalls because of the messages that he's given, because it has challenged me to reach across to my colleagues and find ways to build bridges, and has challenged me to vocalize some of my positions where I've wanted to remain quiet. So his message is reaching much further than these four walls, and I thank him for that. I want to give you just a little bit of background on me, because I think who we are as a person forms who we become as adults and as professionals and as city leaders. I grew up in a small town in southeast Missouri. I was an only child. My dad worked, first as a school teacher in a very small country school, and then for the Division of Family Services. My mom worked for the Department of Agriculture, because in southeast Missouri, you pretty much was surrounded by farmland on four sides. I went to Missouri State. It was then Southwest Missouri State in Springfield, and then to law school here at UMKC, as Pastor McDaniel said. I was a shy little girl that hid behind her mom's skirt tails, and in some ways I still am that shy little girl. I lost my dad 25 years ago, and my mom just over a year ago to COVID. She was in an assisted living facility. But I grew up in the church, and I have pretty much attended church my entire life. Well, not pretty much, I have. Even during college, those rebellious years, I went to church. So I have a basis in helping others and in trying to do what's right. Am I perfect? No. But in all that I do, I try to see others in their time of suffering and then their time of joy. So what is the right to counsel? The right to counsel is a program that's administered through the Housing Department with a structure in place to monitor and report its success. It provides funding through our partner agencies to provide legal services in eviction proceedings. At its basic core, it provides legal representation to those who are being deprived of a basic human right, the right to housing. But it does more than that. It provides housing stability to a family or an individual who is facing the loss of housing and shelter. I think if we understand that, the fact that housing is a basic human right, then the right to counsel is something that there's no question that we need to provide. The elements of the ordinance I'll talk a little bit about, but what I'm really going to talk about and want to spend a lot of time is why the council decided to adopt this ordinance and the processes in which we go about this and how this fits in with our overall policy. I know you heard from the city manager last week about our housing policy. How does this fit into our plan and what we do as a council? There's actually an article, the front page of the Star today, talks a little bit about the groups that were involved in forming this policy as well as some other policies. And in that it talked about 98% of tenants are unrepresented when they go to eviction court. And that the scales of justice should be balanced, but they're not in a lot of ways. They are tipped to one side. And we heard some arguments during this process that said, well, it's a contract. If you don't pay your rent, then you have broken that contract and that you should be evicted. But as we all know, things are not that black and white. There are often extenuating circumstances. And the purpose of this legislation is to provide fairness and justice in the process. I'll tell you what it's not. It is not a process to provide an out for paying rent and thereby removing a source of income to landlords. It is not a way to skirt the system of justice. It is just a way to provide those who are experiencing unfortunate circumstances to have someone on their side to provide them with the advice in a complex legal system. I mean, I'm an attorney, and I worked for years in commercial development. But I knew that if I was outside of my realm of expertise, I should not try to get into other areas of the law. I should seek expertise of those attorneys. I mean, I wouldn't even take care of my own speeding tickets, assuming I get speeding tickets. We know how Ward Parkway is. But there's a process, and for anyone, even a licensed attorney who's gone through law school, there are processes. I never went to court. I mean, that's not what I did. I was a transactional attorney. You don't understand the processes, even as an attorney. So you need someone there to help explain the processes. So what does this do? It provides legal counsel through our partner agencies. The city is not going to be representing individuals. We have what I would call a pilot program now that Legal Aid, Heartland Center for Jobs and Freedom, UMKC provides legal counsel on a smaller scale right now. This will expand that program so that anyone who needs assistance can be provided assistance. It establishes a tenant legal services and assistant director to administer the program. So it's a coordinator. It works with our partner agencies, including United Way, which has kind of been the coordinator, but we will have someone inside City Hall. That person will also try to intervene earlier in the process so that hopefully we won't get to the point where it's in court, where they're on the verge of eviction, and we can resolve the problems earlier in the process. That is really the goal. That is the goal, so that people aren't facing eviction in 10 days or 20 days or 30 days, and we can come up with a better solution, which includes paying the landlords, ensuring that rent goes to the landlord so that all benefits. Next, it establishes a tenant committee to work with the director and staff to monitor and make recommendations. We want to ensure that this process works. Implementation is one of the, I hate to use the word failures of the city. The council often makes big policy issues. We pass plans, but then we fall down in the implementation stage. We, in this ordinance, establish a process and a structure to ensure that that doesn't happen. The fourth point is the structure. we include in this ordinance a structure to ensure that that doesn't happen. And finally, it phases in the process. So we're not just jumping into this saying everybody gets an attorney, but we don't have the capacity to ensure that you have an attorney that's available. So we're ramping it up. We're searching for the funding, hopefully, and we believe in this next budget year that it will come through resources through the federal government and the state that has the funding there, so it won't come out of our general fund. So during the testimony and during my research, we found that other cities, and we are the 13th city. 13 seems to be a lucky number in Kansas City. We are the 13th city that has adopted this. And in other cities, we found that by having this, it reduces houselessness by reducing the number of evictions. Because if you have an eviction, it is harder to rent in the future. And it begins a cycle of difficulties. It also reduces separation of families. I was on a call with one of the proponents of this on KCUR, and we got a call from a family attorney. And it was something that I had not considered, but she was saying that in family court, if you are evicted, you increase the risk of losing custody of your children. So the consequences of eviction are much broader than just losing your home. You can be separated from your children. School children, we heard from our school districts, Kansas City Public Schools, that when children are evicted and they have to move to a different house, it creates instability in their learning. And so the consequences just continue to build up and build up. And finally, it saves the city money. I mean, the money that we are going to spend on attorneys representing and advising the clients now will save anywhere from $3 for every $1 to $12 for every $1. And why is that? Because we all know in other areas that emergency relief costs more than fixing the situation in the beginning. Because houselessness, emergency shelter is more expensive. So that is justification in my mind for doing this. The program that we had before, we were spending $125,000 for legal aid, $65,000 for Heartland Center for Justice, and importantly, $1 million for United Way for rental assistance. A lot of times when we adopt ordinances, you know, they are one part of a bigger plan. And I think what I want to make clear is part of this plan, even though it's right to counsel, it does include rental assistance. So there will be a part of this that provides rental assistance to pay the landlords. I think that is key, and that was not discussed in detail in adoption of this ordinance. But we're not going to, it's not one side or the other. While this right to counsel was very tenant-focused, we are looking at the broader picture here. Let's see. So let's talk a little bit about the legislative process and why this is important, because it's about being a neighbor. I'm looking out here to a lot of Chiefs Red. I don't know if any of you are attorneys that represent tenants and landlord-tenant disputes. So why is this important for me to come and talk to you? I think it goes beyond me coming and saying, will you be one of those attorneys representing and standing before the tenants in the landlord-tenant disputes? Who is your neighbor? If I define my neighbor very narrowly as those people on Arno Road in the block east of Ward Parkway, some of whom were out already with their grills, barbecuing, and getting ready for the Chiefs game this morning. That is a very narrow definition. because everyone on my block has very similar views and ideas. And life would be kind of boring. I mean, most of them have kids that are much younger than I do, but it's slightly different, and I don't know where all the kids come from, but it narrows the scope of who my neighbor is. As Pastor McDaniel said, I'm elected at large. So while I represent the 6th district, I have to represent the city as a whole. So my neighbor is that family east of Troost who may be facing eviction. It's the family in the Crossroads. It's the family in the Northland. It's the family in Verona Hills. So once we start expanding who our neighbor is, then we have to recognize that their needs may be different than our own. Most of the needs of the neighbors on Arno Park don't necessarily face eviction. But what we found during the pandemic, that those who are facing eviction don't necessarily all look alike. They don't necessarily all come from the same background. And so we have to broaden our mind on who our neighbor is and who we are there to serve. You know, we come back to 13 seconds. Last week, in that 13 seconds, our neighbors expanded because we were all a community cheering. And we had many, many differences. We weren't defined by our political background. We weren't defined by our skin color. We weren't defined by even our geographic location. My daughter and her boyfriend were in Georgia. They were cheering for the Chiefs. At least we can agree on that. But we were combined in our unity in those 13 seconds because we expanded who our neighbor was. I heard a story, I think I saw it on Facebook, but there was a man and I think it was his sister, and she was on the autism spectrum, and they went to the game. And she wasn't able to sit with him because their tickets were in different places. And they were searching for, you know, the family that she sat by because the guy was taking selfies with her, high-fiving, and treating her like family. Because in that atmosphere of Arrowhead Stadium, everybody was a neighbor. And he said in this, the newspaper or the TV article, he didn't realize that she was on the spectrum. She was just a fellow, you know, Arrowhead, you know, Chiefs fan, and he was embracing her, looking beyond the differences and being a neighbor. So once we look beyond those differences, we start asking, you know, what is it about the policy and the legislation? I think you all know that Bishop Desmond Tutu died just about a month ago. On Facebook, you know, people were putting quotes, and there was a quote that just hit me in the face. It said, "There comes a point where we need to stop just pulling people out of the river. We need to go upstream and to find out why they're falling in." That is what we are doing as our housing policy, our houselessness policy. We have for so long just put Band-Aids on solutions. Now we are trying to say to our neighbors, why are you falling in the river? What is it that we can do as a city to stop you from falling in the river, not just pull you out of the river once you've gone downstream? And those are hard questions. They take some time, not only to find out the answers to, but to implement them. One of the examples, I think, is right to counsel. We were talking about right to counsel before the pandemic. And it was part of the, kind of the Tenant Bill of Rights, but it got pulled out. And so we sat down and said, well, let's talk about how we can, work on this going forward. And so we talked with UMKC about starting maybe a process of bringing in the law school. And then the pandemic hit. And then we kind of stopped talking about it, except that the pandemic hit. And we saw evictions go up. And then we saw the moratorium. And with the moratorium, there are other issues about rent piling up and what it is that we need to do. And there comes a time where we have to stop people from going down the river, and we have to back up and say, we've got to pull them out. We've got to stop them from jumping in. This is one of those measures that if we can stop people from jumping in, and it's not really they're jumping in, and sometimes we as a society are pushing them. Because we have a system that doesn't work. We have a system that allows, it's almost like if you've ever been to eviction court, I haven't, but I've had people that have been there that have told me how it works. You show up and, it's almost like a cattle call. And it is stacked against those who are being evicted. And to some extent, I think they have given up at that point because they know the system is going to kick them out. So we have to back up. And the program that we have now just provides representation once they get in the system. We're trying to back it up even further and say, what is it that we can do to help you not get in the system? How can we connect you to resources? How can we help you get back up on your feet? There's a saying that a rising tide lifts all boats, and one of my favorite new songs, Zac Brown Band is one of my favorite groups, and they have a song called Same Boat. And I've thought about that a lot lately. And there's some truth in it, except we're not all in the same boat. We may be all in the same ocean, but we have different boats. Some have big boats, some have little boats that can't withstand the rising tides. And so we as a city have to do things that help. And why is that? Because my practice, as I said, has been in real estate development, but also in municipal government for 20-something years. The role of municipal government is to protect the health, safety, and welfare of its citizens. Some of that is just paving roads, picking up trash. If you go back into the history, there's reasons for that. Public health is one reason, because picking up trash, if you just leave it on the side, it creates plagues. But my idea of what the role of local government is to help us as a society, to help the common good. And that includes helping our brothers and sisters and our neighbors who need safe and affordable housing. And how do we get there? How do we know what our neighbors need? Because we listen to them. That's how we got to this point. Because we often make legislation that we as a council think others need. What's most important is we make legislation that others actually need. and listening to our neighbors is key. You know, I think the sermon today is going to talk about a widow who is very persistent. And the judge finally gives in because she's persistent. These people here, they were very persistent. But as the widow in the story today, they were seeking justice. They were not seeking personal gain. Some of these people had already been evicted. They were fighting for others who may be evicted. A few months ago, I was at Union Station for a talk on how elected officials could react to anti-Semitism. We walked through the Auschwitz exhibit. And there was a quote that was given to us by Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, who was the chief rabbi of the United Hebrew Congregation of the Commonwealth of the United Kingdom. And he said, Jews cannot fight anti-Semitism alone. The victim cannot cure the crime. The hated cannot cure the hate. We have to do that. We have to stand. We have to participate. We have to listen. We have to fight. I have never faced eviction. I don't know what that feels like. But when I sat down with Miss Ruby and Nessie and Sabrina and Tiana and Diane Charity, and I listened to their stories, I had tears in my eyes because they were my neighbors, and my neighbors were experiencing a different world than I was. And I was in a position to do something about it. When I was practicing law, people would hire me to go to City Hall to make a change. I did what I did because I was getting paid to do it. I think I was pretty good at it. I mean, they kept paying me, so I guess I was okay. But at some point, I was unfulfilled. I didn't necessarily feel good about going down and advocating for my clients. I felt good about advocating for this because it was the right thing to do. Was it without controversy? No. But back about a year and a half ago, my husband asked me a question when I was struggling with something. And he said, "What side of the bridge are you going to be on?" And that's a decision we all have to make. Are we going to be on the side with John Lewis? Are we going to be on the other side of the bridge? And if you read the paper today, you know, the groups that we see here can be criticized for their vocal advocacy because they are disruptive. They yell. But it's because we haven't listened. It's because they have to speak loudly in order for us to hear them. And that's unfortunate because as elected officials, everyone is our neighbor. It shouldn't matter how much money you have, what position you have. We should be listening to everyone. It shouldn't take them coming week after week after week to listen to speak and to yell to get our attention. Because this is the right thing to do. And we as a council are attempting to create a policy that helps everyone. Will our affordable housing policy actually help everyone? I don't know. But I think it's important that in the end, it will provide housing to those who cannot afford housing. And in the end, it will, I think, help everyone, because it will address some of the issues that are facing Kansas City right now. And in that instance, I think when the tide rises, then all the boats will rise. Because if we reinforce all of the boats, then that's when they're all safe. So, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman Bough. We'll now open up to questions. So whether you are physically here or whether you are online, if you're online, feel free to type in your question in the comment section. We'll call them out. As you're thinking of a question response, Councilwoman Bough, one of the things that came into my mind was there was some opposition. Mm-hmm. There was some pushback. And recognizing that not everyone in this room is going to be sitting in your desk at City Hall, mm-hmm. What did you note inside of you that kept you moving forward, even in light of opposition, pushback? What did you? How are you different today than what you were a year and a half ago? By what drove you? What was inside of you that kept moving you forward?
You know, that's a good question. I am. My husband once said I was very contemplative. And I've questioned every decision I make. And so if somebody says, well, this is horrible, then I start thinking, I second guess myself every time. But it always came back to the stories that I heard and the lives of people that are impacted by evictions. And those that have said, if I had only had right to counsel when I was going through this, then my life could be different. And the impact that we could make with this legislation that really, in the grand scheme of things, has a very small price tag. That's what kept me going. The motivation and the fact that this actually, even some of the groups that were in opposition, some of their members were supportive of this because they knew that it brought a level of civility into the process, and it brought down some of the emotion because you were providing a non-biased, unemotional voice into the system. So it was really the stories that I heard of how what we could do could have such a great impact in the lives of others.
Thank you. What question do you have?
Unfamiliar as I am with this process, or even the eviction process, what kind of time frame are we talking about from the time that somebody realizes that this is processing, and what does it entail? Is it months, weeks, years?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think in the way it's working now, it's a very short process. It could be 30 days, because a lot of times they are calling United Way and they have a hearing like the next day or a couple of days, and they're facing eviction in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. It's a very short period of time. So some of the benefits of having an attorney involved, or the system that we are trying to put into place, is we're going to try to find out have an agreement with the courts that we know when an eviction is filed, so the process can start before the hearing or even earlier. I mean, what we would love to see is a system in which we can avoid the filing of evictions in the first place. But it is often a very short process, and I think some of the times, the lady with the microphone is Gina Chiala. She is the executive director of Heartland Center for Jobs and Freedom. You know, sometimes what they do is go in and try to negotiate a process by which they can at least allow those who are facing eviction to have more time to find a new place to go. So it is a very short process often.
Okay. You hold it? Yeah. My question is, it's two-sided coin. What happens to the owners who could go bankrupt? And there's a problem there. You know, they have rights as well.
Sure, absolutely. And what is key here is, you know, this is in no way an attempt to relieve the tenants of their contractual rights. And a key to this, and you know, the city just received additional funding from the state of Missouri for rental assistance, and it's ensuring that the tenants have access to counsel who can connect them with rental assistance to get the funding to the landlords. It is in no way an attempt to relieve them of their obligation to pay rent. It's in fact to try to get that rent paid so that both the tenant and the landlord can benefit from the situation. Absolutely.
What type of resources are you using to reach out to the people to find out what would prevent them from ending up in this situation?
So the city just, let's see, about a little less than a year ago, established a separate housing department. I actually sponsored the ordinance to do this. And we are establishing kind of a tenant advocacy, well, it's been established for a while, but we are hiring and bolstering that tenant advocacy department in order to reach out to tenants and to ensure, you know, there is utility assistance available, there is rental assistance available. And so we have a tenant advocacy department or group that is reaching out to tenants and making sure that that assistance is known, and to absolutely try to prevent this from occurring. And we also, you know, as part of our, you know, one thing, whether it's our, you know, houselessness policy, we are working on, you know, job creation and job resources to ensure that those who are looking for a job have connection to jobs. So we are working with our neighborhoods department, our housing department, our public works department, a combined effort to find assistance and connect people with jobs.
So, Ms. Bough, if a young woman who has 3 or 4 children is evicted tomorrow, who's helping her find some shelter on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday? How's that work?
You know, we have various agencies. United Way, we support United Way. We have various agencies that will help with connect them. But that is part of this whole process, is to ensure that the transition is smooth. And there are very agencies that are working to ensure that.
What else? Mr. Lau, I'm gonna walk around to you.
That's all right.
But there's people online, so.
Oh, that's right. I'm a longtime church member, but also a former landlord, 40 years experience. Also half a century ago, I worked at City Hall in what was then called the City Council office before there was an action center. So I've seen both sides of it. My real estate adventures were mostly low-income housing. I had a few commercial properties, developed some things from bare ground, the kind of things you used to do. And I think your folks deserve a pat on the back. In your line of work, you don't get very many of those. So add a girl and add a boy, you know. And it's a problem that, I would guess, in most parts of this country, the problem got kicked down the road. The can was kicked down the road forever, and it happened with other issues too, like our sewer system. Previous councils, the council I worked with 50 years ago, they were wonderful people. For $75 a week, they put in a lot of hours, you know, and they acted like full-time people. But they never would have addressed housing. That was not even in a dream of theirs, probably. It was just somebody else's problem. It was a private thing. But as a landlord, I saw the problem. I finally sold all my properties except one because I could see, as an economics major, there's a graph, you know. Cost of living went this way, their average income went down, or it was stagnant. The people making $89 an hour, $8 or $9 an hour, they can't live. They can't rent a house. Two families crammed into one house still probably can't make it. And it's a complicated problem, as you know. Housing, homelessness, landlord rights, it's all part of the same big pie. And you folks are to be congratulated for taking it on. It's tough. So, atta girl. Keep at it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, and that's what, I mean, a little bit of, maybe not full disclosure, but a little bit of disclosure. When we were talking about what the series might look like, and actually, I think I said, I asked Mr. Lau, as a landlord, where's your head in this? And so, Steve, thank you so much for verbalizing what we talked about a little bit quietly, but also, it is complex. And that's sort of the reason why we're doing this. City Hall can't do it all by themselves. Nonprofits can't do it all by themselves. It is a significant health and life issue. So what are those ways and those intersections that the various groups can come together to raise the tide? We're not going to be able to sit in the courtroom in representation, but we're all in this thing together. And I would even argue at a church, as people of faith, this is theological kingdom work, realm of God work. But the sermon is later this morning, so we'll get into that a little bit later.
Just a couple of clarifying questions. Were tenants prohibited from having counsel before this measure, or just mostly unable to afford them?
Mostly unable to afford them.
And did landlords have right to counsel that they could afford and bring with them?
They generally, I think landlords have the ability to hire, you know, it's part of their business practice to do it, or some may not even have, they may not have counsel, but they have the business acumen to be there. So it just was, they were disproportionately represented by attorneys because I think in a lot of situations, you know, and we can't necessarily compare, you know, paint a broad brush and say everyone is the same, because there are some, you know, large multifamily landlords that are corporations or LLCs, and there's some smaller landlords, but, you know, some are just a business and they have representation, and it's nothing to send an attorney. But generally, I think it's a sense of affordability that you can have representation.
So looking at time, we have two questions online. I see Beth's hand, so we'll ask one online, then Beth, and then back online. One of the questions online is, how is the city working to crack down on owners renting out substandard housing that is deplorable?
You know, that is, our new neighborhoods director is actually working on that. It's an issue that we've had in the city, and we've talked with Forrest Decker, our new neighborhoods director, about how we approach. In some instance, it's code violations. In some instance, it is just the upkeep of your property and ensuring that we address the problem. So if it's, an older couple or an older individual that, is under the weather and just can't keep up with the property, let's find the resources and help out. If it is an out-of-state landlord, let's approach that situation differently. That is just neglecting the property. So I am very excited about the vision and that Forrest has in the neighborhoods department, and I think that is something that we are really going to see a change on how we approach that.
I'm not sure this is a question or not. I hate this thing. But I think if people can't afford their rent, how are they going to come up with first month's rent, last month's rent, deposits? Like you said, eviction, who's going to rent to them? It just leads to more homelessness and families on the street. So I think it's a great thing that you're doing to help help people stay in their homes, their kids in their schools.
And it's a part of a larger issue that we are facing as a city. We are connecting them with rental assistance, but we also have to address the issue of affordable housing. We've established a housing trust fund to try to create more affordable housing units so that we can actually have places for families and individuals to go.
And finally, question online. Is the city planning to offer education regarding budgeting, learning to cook healthy meals versus fast food, etc., and job training is the other vital issue? People need training so they can gain a career, not just a low-paying job.
Sure, absolutely. I think there is a landlord-tenant university that's the city provides right now. But absolutely, we're looking at all areas with jobs. It can't be. We have to provide housing, but we have to provide the whole approach to ensuring that the boats are stable, because you can't just put someone in a boat and not teach them how to sail. To keep my analogy going, I'm usually not this good at coming up with stuff off the top of my head.
Well, if someone thinks of a question or a comment that is not being articulated right now, but maybe a few days later, what would be the best way to ask the question, to get connected with you?
Absolutely.
How can someone contact you?
I think the best way would be by email, Andrea, Andrea, Bough, BOUGH, @kcmo.org.
Now she was very honest. What you don't know is last week, when the question was asked how to get connected with you, Brian Platt, City Manager Platt, responded, Quentin.Lucas, KCMO.
Oh, I should have said Brian.Platt
right,
at kcmo.org.
Yeah.
I was going to say there's a theme in our email addresses, so you can probably figure out how to get in contact with any of us.
Well, Councilwoman Bough, thank you for all you are, for who you are. As we have said before, leading in general is hard. Leading the time of pandemic is exponentially harder. Mm-hmm. And fighting and leading towards things that are beyond yourself is such a rarity. So thank you for what you embody, for who you lead, for leading us into a greater good, into a greater justice of Kansas City.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilman Bough should be up here for a little bit, but worship will begin at 10:15. We always start at 10:15. So go to the restroom, say hello, and we will begin worship at 10:15. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, I forgot to say, next week, U.S. District Judge Steve Bough, that might sound familiar, and reentry court / drug court. The penal system is not good about actual rehabilitation. So what are ways that connected to housing that Judge Bough has created a system that help people get back into society, into a good, healthier kind of a place? next week, 9 o'clock, same bat time, same bat place. Thank you.